This year I played some amazing games, and many of them weren't even released this year. On one hand, I dived into games I hadn't played before, on the other I explored some of the newer releases. Yet there are still tons of games I haven't touched. For instance, I still haven't played Balatro. I haven't had the chance to play Stalker 2 either. Dragon's Dogma and Black Myth Wukong are also on my yet to play list. Some of you might be wondering, well, if you haven't played these games, what did you even play this year? Well, other games? I'm not someone who usually plays games the moment they're released. Of course, I'll play the games I mentioned in 2025, there's no rush. By the way, if you'd like to see all the games I have played and rated, you can check out my backlog account. I'll leave the link in the description. This list was made somewhat randomly, but I did group together some games of similar genres. Also, many of the games I'll talk about include spoilers, just a heads up. Anyway, if you're ready, let's dive into the list. Like I said, this year I didn't feel the urge to play many games as soon as they were released, except for Elden Ring's DLC. When Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree came out, I dedicated that entire week to it. From Software did it once again. I finished Shadow of the Erdtree and loved it. It's a massive expansion with new weapons, a new map, and new bosses. Some bosses were incredibly enjoyable: Dancing Lion, Relana, Mesmer, Bale, and my favorite was Needle Knight Leda. Fighting Leda and their companions with my allies, all while an epic soundtrack played in the background, felt like a movie scene. However, the final boss didn't quite meet my expectations. I never expected to see Radahn again in this game. Sure, it gave us a chance to see his true power, but I think introducing a new character instead of Radahn would have been better. They also made Radahn fight ridiculously hard, just for the sake of being hard. I believe they later patched the game to tone him down. I also didn't like the map design. Huge areas are connected by tiny pathways, which I found frustrating. To move from one area to another, you mostly have to use a single passage. It felt like they combined linear maps and call it open world. Another mechanic I didn't enjoy was the Scadutree fragments. It's as if you are starting the game from scratch. If you don't collect the fragments, you're extremely weak. Regardless of whether you're level 150 or 300, this mechanic undermines the significance of leveling up and collecting runes, which also diminishes the sense of exploration. But despite all this, Shadow of the Erdtree left me with good memories. I'm glad I played it, and I trust From Software. With that said, when I saw the new Elden Ring game announced at the Game Awards, I have to admit I wasn't excited at all. I hope it turns out to be a good game. Silent Hill 2 Remake. Another game I played shortly after its release was the Silent Hill 2 Remake. I hadn't played any of the previous Silent Hill games, so this remake was my introduction to the series. So I can't compare it to the original. I can say that I mostly enjoyed the remake though. The psychological tension was palpable and the gameplay wasn't as bad as the trailers made it seem. However, the second half of the game felt unnecessarily dragged out. It could have ended a few hours earlier. It was definitely worth playing, but the latter parts could have been less tedious. The puzzles were intriguing and engaging at first, but by the end they become frustrating. For instance, there's a puzzle where you need to burn a curtain. First you have to find a lighter, then lighter fluid, and finally a wick. I get that games don't have to adhere strictly to real-world logic, but it was annoying to spend half an hour on such a small obstacle. Just pull the curtain down, man. While puzzles are fun to solve, the parts that come afterward shouldn't feel like unnecessary busywork. Once you've figured out what to do, the execution shouldn't be tedious. Despite these issues, Silent Hill 2 left an impression on me. I watched a ton of video essays afterwards and felt like I gained something from the experience. If you enjoy this genre and don't mind a bit of tediousness, give it a try. I finally got around to playing Firewatch. It's a walking simulator that had been on my radar for ages, but I never had the chance to try. I love walking simulators. Edith Finch, Gone Home, and Dear Esther are some of the best examples of this genre, and they have all left a mark on me. Whenever those games are mentioned, Firewatch is always part of the conversation. So I'd been meaning to play it for a long time, and I finally did it. And it was alright, I guess. I mean, it's definitely a good game, but it fell slightly short of my expectations. The way the conversations with Delilah concluded wasn't quite what I was hoping for. That said, the atmosphere, clever dialogue, and overall experience made it memorable. I'm glad I played it. Mouthwashing. One of the most striking games of the year is Mouthwashing. I'm not someone who gets scared easily by horror games, but Mouthwashing had moments that genuinely creeped me out. I mentioned it in my Cosmophobia in Games video. Feel free to check that out to see why I found this game so impactful. Despite its short playtime, it packs in numerous brilliant sequences. Narratively, it's phenomenal. For example, the gun sequence is so well designed that it's far more impactful than the similar sequence in Silent Hill. Sure, Silent Hill has a similar moment, but I wouldn't call it particularly gripping. In contrast, the sequence in Mouthwashing really gets under your skin. Psychologically, I think Mouthwashing is even more compelling than Silent Hill. If you're someone who prefers horror games that unsettle you through narrative rather than jump scares, you should absolutely give Mouthwashing a try. What can I even say about Call of Duty Black Ops 6? It's just another version of the same old formula. The story was meh. I tried the zombie mode and even that wasn't very enjoyable. The zombie mode in Call of Duty World War II is far superior. I can't really comment on the multiplayer though, as the last time I played Call of Duty Online was back in Modern Warfare 3 in 2011. But since it's on Game Pass, I won't criticize it too harshly. But honestly, it's just another Call of Duty game. You won't miss much if you skip it. Alan Wake 2 turns out to be one of this year's surprises for me. The game actually was released in late 2023, but I played it this year. I wasn't expecting such a high quality game. Its atmosphere and mystery-laden story captivated me. As someone who played and enjoyed the first Alan Wake when it came out, I can say that the sequel builds upon its predecessor. It's a solid continuation. The puzzles aren't overly frustrating, and seeing Sam Lake as Max Payne in the game was a delightful surprise. I even added the soundtrack to my playlist. However, the game might have gotten tedious if it were longer. It transitions to different sequences just as things start to drag, which helps keep it engaging. Next up, Viewfinder. Viewfinder is a puzzle game, although it's not a release from this year. I just got around to playing it. The game revolves around an interesting mechanic. You can place photos at any angle, and whatever's in the photo becomes real. For instance, if you need to cross a gap but there's no bridge, you can find a photo of a wall, rotate it sideways, and voila! It's now a bridge. Viewfinder is a unique game, and if you enjoy puzzles, it's worth checking out. Ghost of Tsushima is another game I didn't get to play when it first came out. You may have heard it described as a samurai-themed Assassin's Creed, and that's not entirely wrong. However, it feels more like a well-executed Assassin's Creed game. While I didn't enjoy the recent Assassin's Creed games much, I found Ghost of Tsushima relatively more enjoyable. With that said, I wouldn't say I loved it, but I think it's above average. The combat system is satisfying, and exploring 1200s Japan is breathtaking. I'll probably play the sequel when it comes out. One detail I loved was that Jin's voice actor is the same person who voices Zoro in One Piece, and that was a plus. However, while the story started off strong, I quickly grew bored with it. By the latter half, I was barely invested in the narrative. Still, I finished the game, though I spent the second half watching streams on my second monitor. I tend to do this with games whose stories don't fully engage me, and Ghost of Tsushima was no exception. That said, I don't regret playing it. This game is addictively fun. It's essentially a game of roulette, but with a shotgun. Each round, the shotgun is loaded with both empty and live shells, and you choose whether to shoot at yourself or your opponent. If you shoot yourself and the gun is empty, your turn continues. But if you shoot your opponent and they survive, or the gun is empty, then it's their turn now. The best part of the game is the additional items you can use strategically. For instance, you can use a lens to check if the gun is loaded, or cuffs to get 2 consecutive turns. Planning your strategy, outwitting your opponent, and raking in your winnings is incredibly satisfying. What starts as just one quick round often turns into hours of gameplay. Finally, this year I got the chance to play Cyberpunk. Yes, the game I've been waiting for years. It finally came out in 2024, and this masterpiece was worth waiting 10 years for. Anyway, let me drop the sarcasm. Cyberpunk is a shitty game, guys. I've been waiting for the game to be fixed since it first launched in 2020, and I hadn't touched it until now. After hearing it was fixed with the Phantom Liberty DLC, I decided to give it a try, and it was a disaster. Is this the fixed version? Is this a joke? And I'm not talking about the technical side. I didn't encounter any bugs or technical issues. The game is just mediocre overall. The story starts off well, but where it ends up is terrible. There seem to be interesting characters and ideas, but none of them are properly developed. And the RPG elements just there for the sake of it. Forget the story, even the gameplay isn't good. Shooting feels weak and incomplete, melee combat isn't refined at all, the driving mechanics are super basic, and as for the AI, there is none. The open world is completely empty, there's literally no activity. Cyberpunk is a game that looks full from the outside but is completely hollow inside. Honestly, I was expecting at least a Witcher level role-playing experience, but instead it turned out to be a knockoff GTA. And you know what? I'd been okay with a knockoff GTA, but it didn't even manage to be that. This game isn't finished, guys. It's a half-baked game. It genuinely feels like a huge part of it was cut out, and we are left playing the scraps. For me, Cyberpunk was a huge disappointment. I watched the Edgerunners anime too. I didn't like it either. Anyway, I have nothing more to say about Cyberpunk. If you played it and liked it, that's great, but I didn't enjoy it. So, let's move on. I'm not much of an online shooter fan, and battle royale games aren't my thing, so Hunt Showdown didn't initially catch my attention. But thanks to my friends, I gave it a shot, and I'm so glad I did. It's been my most played online game this year. The thrill of hunting a boss on the map, fighting other players for the bounty, and then trying to escape is incredibly engaging. I love the old school weapons and the slow-paced, methodical gameplay. Reloading takes time, and every move requires careful thought. The sound design is outstanding. Unlike most multiplayer games where I can play without headphones, sound is crucial in Hunt. Every creak, gunshot or footstep matters. Even now, my friends and I hop on for a few rounds occasionally. I highly recommend it. As someone who usually plays games alone, this year I ended up playing a lot of games with my friends. And I guess I missed playing with others after all. After Hunt, my friends and I started getting into these party games, and I had so much fun with all of them. Liar's Bar is one of them. It's hilarious when you catch your friend lying in the first round and then they end up shooting themselves in one go. The gun only has one bullet and there's a 1 in 6 chance of dying. But this kept happening to one of my friends back to back. He kept dying in the first round and didn't even get to play the game fully. We couldn't stop laughing. Lockdown Protocol is another party game. God help me, I had moments in this game where I laughed so hard I couldn't even play. Lies, accusations, betrayal. There were moments when I couldn't stop laughing as I pulled these stunts on my friends. If you are looking for a game to play as a group, you should definitely give this one a try. Lethal Company and Content Warning fall into this category too. These games are a lot of fun as well. I didn't play them as much as the others, but I still had a great time. These 4 games were the laughing with friends games of the year for me. Half Sword is another game that gave me endless laughter. I think it's still in early access, but even in its current state, it's absolutely hilarious. The clumsy combat system creates moments of ridiculousness you rarely see in games. Just put on some funny music in the background and it's impossible to play without cracking up. Indika was one of this year's hidden gems for me. It's such an underrated game, I didn't expect it to be this good. Honestly, it felt so genuine. The story is also incredible. You play as a nun in the 19th century Russia. Just the concept itself is fascinating. And let me tell you, the game is surreal. Like really surreal. Some absolutely crazy things happen. I doubt many people have played this game, so I won't spoil too much. With its psychological elements and intriguing storytelling, Indika is full of surprises and much more than it appears to be. If you are looking for a visually stunning narrative-driven game, you should definitely give Indika a shot. So let's move on to horror games. Graveyard Shift was an interesting experience. There were moments that scared me and others that I found boring. To be honest, I don't usually get scared by horror games. You might ask then, why do you play them? Well, I guess it's for the mystery. There's a sense of mystery in horror games that draws me in. I enjoy exploring these short experiences. I'd say Graveyard Shift gave me enough of that mysterious vibe. But my favorite horror game this year has to be Tostchu. The horror games I enjoy most tend to fall into the analog horror category, such as Puppet Combo or Chillazart games. When I first saw Tostchu, it gave me a similar vibe to those games. This game is set in 1990s Turkey, where you play as a toast maker. And despite the absence of jump scares, the game is incredibly unsettling. Personally, I didn't find it very scary, but I'm not easily frightened anyway. Still, I can say it made me feel tense. There is this underlying unease in the game, a feeling that something isn't quite right. Everything seems normal at first. Customers come in and ask for toast and you make it for them. But something weird is definitely happening in this godforsaken place. They nailed that atmosphere perfectly. There is also a working radio and TV in the game, which accompany you throughout your shifts. And also the toast making mechanic is surprisingly detailed. Usually in games like this, those sequences are simplified. But in Tostchu, there is an actual physics system. You slice the sausage and cheese, assemble the sandwich, butter it up and toast it. Honestly, it almost gave me a Voices of the Void kind of vibe. That's kind of my favorite game in this genre. Anyway, if you like analog horror, you should give Tostchu a try. Bad Parenting was another horror game I enjoyed. It's a short experience with a very uncanny atmosphere. The story is also pretty sad. Its mysterious tone and analog visuals make it a game that can leave an impression on you. There is a strong sense of mystery too. If you happen to come across, give it a go. This game is amazing. After a disaster, people start knocking on your door, seeking refuge. You get to decide who to let in. However, there is talk about alien-like creatures that look just like humans. Your job is to figure out if the person at your door is truly human or not. Once you let someone in, you test them to find out if they are really human. I love games like this. Clever ideas that instantly pull you into another world with just a few lines of text and visuals. I have so much respect for games that can achieve this level of immersion with simple graphics and gameplay. I'll definitely finish it when the full version of this game is released. First to Fathom Woodbury Getaway. The new First to Fathom game was fine too, but honestly these games are starting to feel repetitive. Still they are fun to experience though. Wreckfest. Well, a lot of people suggested Wreckfest under my second video, so I decided to give it a try, and I'm so glad I did. As someone who loves car destruction games, I don't know how I overlooked this one. Wreckfest turned out to be so much fun. Plus, it's made by the developers of Flatout. Thanks to everyone who suggested it. If I'd played it earlier, I'd have definitely included it in that video. Speaking of destruction, this game is all about breaking stuff. Literally everything in the game can be torn apart. And that's your job. There isn't much else to say about it. If you enjoy smashing things, this game is for you. Honestly, imagining it, I feel like I'd enjoy doing this as a real job. It could be pretty interesting. Anyway, that's the last game. The list is technically over, but I'm currently playing 2 more games, Space Marine 2 and Darksiders Genesis. I've played about 3 hours of Space Marine 2 and so far it's been a fun experience, and Darksiders Genesis is quite entertaining as well. I'll likely finish both of them soon. So that leaves me with 125 games in my backlog. I plan to make a video about them in the future. If you want to see those games now, you can follow me on Backlog, link in the description. Thanks so much for watching, and if you subscribe, it would mean the world to me. See you on the next video and Happy New Year!